Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Chill. Got another video for today, and this is going to be the first time on this channel, and more than likely the first time in the game that someone has tested every single trinket that does damage. There's 59 trinkets altogether, and that's backup, henchman, psychic, all the weapons, SM trinkets, event trinkets, everything. They're all tested at CR273. They're all tested at 60-second parsers because most trinkets, besides a few, last the entire 60-second duration. And they're tested 3 different parsers, taking the damage and the hit count, so I can get an idea of kind of the difference. So if one parser is lower, one's higher, then you can kind of tell by the hit count why the damage was like that. Obviously, 3 parsers isn't like going to be a definitive result of their damage, but it's enough damage to get an idea to give it to you. It's not going to be a drastic difference between these 3 parsers if you do like 10 parsers. It's still going to give you an idea of the damage it's going to do. So we'll kind of get some points out of the way. The reason why I don't do these on 8-second, like at the 8 sparring targets, is because that's not realistic in combat. There's a really wide damage spread on those 8 sparring targets, because in a raid you can have the tank pulling, grouping up adds. Like, they're not going to be spread out that far, like 5 meter, 10 meters between one add to the next, because there's a lot of pets that do AoE damage, but the AoE is pretty much in a tight cone. So if there's adds really spread out, it's not going to hit. So it's going to be inconsistent. So it's really not realistic to test anything on the 8 sparring targets. The italic ones that you see, like the Boo Utility Belt, Mr. Boo and stuff, those are the ones that I don't have, that I had friends to help, but they had the exact same CR and setup as I did. The Death Blossom and the Blossoming Spore and all the Pumpkin Jacks, they still do the fake damage explosion. So if you do a parse, it'll say like max hit 78902 because it's a set damage for each CR tier. That does not show on the scorecard. That is only showing on the parser. So it does like the fake damage when the pet explodes. That doesn't work in raids or on the scorecard at all. That's tested. It just shows it on the parser. So you just have to subtract that when you actually test it. The Shadow Snake and the Green Crystal Turret are the unique ones from Survival Mode. Those ones only last for 10 seconds and they despawn. The Green Crystal is purely single target. The Snake Turret is purely AoE. And once they're spawned, they don't move. Like, it's not a pet that's going to follow you. Whenever you summon it, that's when it actually is. So you have to make sure you're in range. Mrs. Boo will also do some encasement damage. So if the adds are encased, like say ice blocked or whatever like that, mental encasements, Mrs. Boo will proc an explosion that does additional damage. Obviously I can't test that in this video on the sparring targets, but I did do a previous Boo Trinket Utility Belt video where I did test that damage, and it added about 20,000 damage to the parse. So if like Mrs. Boo did 136,000, it'd be another 20,000 on the 3 targets on the explosion proc. So instead of 136, it'd be 156. That's roughly what I saw. Maybe higher, 273, but at 262 CR, it was about an extra 20,000 damage. So nothing extraordinary, but it can happen. The 4-leaf Clover Leprechaun, very high attack damage hits, 14k per tick. So we go for a Cleave Clover, but only attacks 15-16 times. That's why you do have the higher damage. But it was really inconsistent in its attacking. Sometimes, normally you just kind of tap the sparring targets once, you're in combat, and the trinkets keep attacking. The 4-leaf Clover Leprechaun was a bit inconsistent. He didn't always want to attack. So those parsers were a bit inconsistent in terms of the damage. So if it attacked the normal amount of times, you saw like great damage. If it didn't, then you didn't. Shadow Werewolves backup. This one, they will lunge directly into melee range as soon as they spawn. Like, they'll do like the initial kind of range burst, and they'll leap into melee range, so to assist in body blocking. Most of the backups are all like rifle, hand blaster, dual pistol, stuff like that. So they stay at max range. They're not going to go melee range. Where Shadow Werewolves will. They're the only backups that really lunge into melee range consistently. Then the Sewer backup, once I get to them, they're a bit inconsistent in the hits. If you had like the higher hits, like 315, it was amazing damage. If you had the lower end of the spectrum, it was lower damage. So I just found with the Sewer backup, more than anything else, it was just inconsistent with how hard they hit. So it'd be a better picture to have 10 or 15 parses of the Sewer backup to see that idea. But obviously that's a bit overkill for this video. So to kind of get into the damage here, there wasn't really too many surprises in terms of the damage. Really the only surprise that I found was the 4-leaf Clover Trinket. So obviously the Boo Utility Belt is going to be by far the best damage. That's always been the case. That's basically the 4 boos put together. More realistic, it's like 3 boos, because the 4 boos would drop your CR a little bit. because obviously you wouldn't have the proper utility belt or the CR trinket to bring it up. Summer events, the pure melee, once again, through all my testing, that's been the best melee trinket, because obviously Boo utility belt's not realistic. Mainly what you do is you'd have the second armory setup, so you'd have the Boo utility belt, 4 Boo summon on that armory, summon them, switch armories to a regular DPS armory, and then DPS, and then you've got full access to your normal utility belt, and you've got the 4 Boos out giving you an extra, 500,000 damage, so it's basically like a supercharge. That's why it's pretty cheesy to use the Boos. But that's the type of damage you're getting. And then the actual solo trinket, the sunken Slayer Sunken Rune, that's over 350k damage, and that's just the trinket alone. That's in pure melee range. Shadowbat, once again, there's a lot of talk about Shadowbat and Seahorse. A lot of my testing, I've found that the Shadowbat is better than the Seahorse. He said eventually would average out. So if you did like 50 or 60 parses, then it might average out. But all the parsing that I've done, Shadowbat's being a bit higher damage than the Seahorse. The Shadowbat's was only available around 25 SM, where the Seahorse is available to anyone as long as they beat that race. So it's a bit restrictive, obviously, for the Shadowbat, but it is. Throughout all my personal testing, the Shadowbat has been better than the Seahorse each time. They're both similar. Like the Seahorse, it does single target for a bit. Shadowbat a little bit more AoE, but it still does some single target as well. Shadow Snake turret, once again, this turret does a little bit better if there's multiple targets. Like say the 8 targets doesn't really work because they're really far apart, but if they're like a big group of ads, like Shadow Gotham, when the first initial ad, the tank pulls all together, that's when you want the Shadow Snake turret. So if it's like a big initial burst of ads, like in a hallway, you want the Shadow Snake turret, and then after that you'd swap into like the Summer Event trinket, or like Shadowbat, something like that, because the Shadow turret, this 219,000 damage, that's in 10 seconds. Where this Shadowbat, Seahorse, the Sunken Rune, that's in 60 seconds. So all this damage here, this is spread out over 60 seconds, and this is in 10 seconds. So it's just depending on the situation, if the ads are going to die quickly, if it's an older raid, if it's a brand new raid, then that may not be as beneficial because obviously they're going to last longer. But just keep that in mind that this damage here from the Shadow Snake turret, this is all done in 10 seconds compared to everything else, which is over 60 seconds or near like 55 seconds. 4-leaf Clover, once again, that was the one surprise. I didn't think it'd be that good because that's what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's top 6. So top 6 in the game is the 4-leaf Clover. That's from the St. Patrick's Day seasonal. That's the Leprechaun box. But I didn't expect that to be top 6. And then Robot Sidekick Melee, obviously, that's the iconic power. Green Crystal Turret, that is purely single target damage. So once again, this 148,406, that's purely single target, and that's done in 10 seconds. But most people through SM already know about that trinket. LexCorp trinket, that's the one that cost, like 10 bucks or something. Heartbreak, that's the Valentine's one. My Collector's Edition Batrone. Actually, I guess I should put an asterisk. This is not every single trinket tested. There's the Flying Jester Joker trinket. I have that, but I don't have it at CR 273, so it's going to throw the numbers off. And it'd be really hard to find the villain that bought the Collector's Edition for the PC or PS3. So that is the one trinket. So there's actually 60 trinkets in the game. There's one that's not tested, and that's the Flying Jester Collector's Edition, just because I don't have it at proper CR. So I'm not sure. I'm assuming it would do similar damage. Boo Jr., Mr. Boo, Baby Boo, Mrs. Boo. So this is the difference here, where if you're not melee range, then the Summer Event trinket only does 131 at range, but it does 354 at pure range. That's because there's an acid spit attack. So just be mindful that this is a melee trinket only. If you're going to be range fighting, then there's no point to use it, because look how much the drop off in damage is about 200,000 difference. If you're going to be range fighting, you're much better off running like the Seahorse or Shadowbat. Brainiac Pet, that's from the anniversary. Eerie Jack Pumpkin. Actually, this is the other surprise too, the sewer backup. So we'll get into a breakdown here because I've got the Psychic and Henchman on separate ones. But the sewer backup is actually a nice surprise because that's actually the best backup by far. Well, not really by far, but by 20k. So there's the Modern Eastern at like 75, 76, 77. And this is the sewer's almost 100k. So you're getting 100k parse with a backup. So the backups are normally pretty trash, which I'll show in a moment. But if you have the sewer layer, then that's actually the most beneficial backup to run. Robot Psychic range, obviously there's a huge drop off in that damage, and then kind of here you get into the regular stuff. All the backups. Shadow Werewolves backup, Sidekicks. The worst trinket in the entire game is the Brainiac backup, the Brainiac layer, 36. And then after that, Sidekick dual pistols. Those are the only trinkets at CR273 that were under 40k. And then the Man-Bat Commandos, which are usually pretty garbage too. They're a bit higher, 57, but that's because all the Sidekicks. Sidekicks aren't even meant for damage, but people always ask me what they do. So kind of going down to the graph, it's a little bit hard to read because there's obviously 59 things. So I'm kind of zoom up here a little bit. Oop, that's too far. So you kind of get the idea here. So it's basically, there's 6 trinkets in the game that are good, and then all the rest are like okay. So it kind of gives like grouping. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down to the 4-leaf clover. So that's like, you know, the tier 1, upper echelon, you know, the best trinkets you can do for damage. And then basically you've got this group here that goes from robot psychic range to robot psychic melee, where it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, like 12 trinkets that do comparative damage in close. Like say like, you know, this is like S tier, this is A tier, and then you've got a whole bunch of trinkets that do like, you know, B damage from modern backup down to probably the 25th century communicator one, the tank one that gives 5% health. And then you've basically got this bottom group that like just sucks, that doesn't do anything. So we can kind of break down the other ones. So let's do all the sidekicks. So obviously dual pistols are the worst. So basically they range from 38k to 61k. So obviously nothing to write home about. But once again, if you're going to use the sidekick and you want, you know, to do some damage, Shadow Man-Bat and martial arts will be the best for that. Shadow Bat is just really good in general, and the martial arts obviously because they can do the shuriken and spinning punch. That does a bit of AoE damage. But everything else is pretty close, like 51 to 55, like a 4,000 gap between most of them. Two-handed brawling staff rifle, dual wield, because obviously they're melee. And then the range ones aren't as good, like dual pistols, bow, hand blast. So it's not really a huge gap, as you can see on the graph. Like they're pretty close. Like you've got martial arts and the Shadow Bat, and then you've got kind of dual wields, rifle and staff, and then everything else. So not too much surprises there with the sidekicks. And then in terms of henchmen, once again, they range, the sewer is the outlier, but they range from like 36 to 77. So there's still like a 40k gap between them. So there's a whole bunch at like 40 to 50. And then there's a whole bunch between 50 to 60. And then like, you know, the few good ones like 74, 75, 76, 77. So they're all really close here, like Shadow Werewolves, Hideout, Eastern, and Modern. But then the sewer is just like above everything else. But it really just depends. Like, you know, 91k at 303, over 100k at 313. So it just depends on your hit count on the sewer backup. That's the hazmat suit guys. But if you can get a nice hit count, that is going to be the best backup trinket to run. Because you know, all the pets will share a cooldown. The psychic will share a cooldown with the henchman. So if you're not running a psychic, you could summon a backup between a boss fight or something. Because obviously the sewer backup, this is over 60 seconds. Still compare that to, you know, any of these damage. That's nothing. 100k versus like 300k, 500k, you know, 200k. That's nothing. So you don't want to be running just a sewer backup on your loadout. You want to be running the pets, obviously, because they're going to do a lot more damage. But then since the hideout ones or the backups don't share a cooldown, you do have the ability to, like, say, before a boss fight or when you're out of combat, to summon these and then, you know, put your pet back on. So if you do want to sneak in some extra, like, you know, 100k damage, you have that ability if you have the sewer layer. And if not, everyone should have the hideout one. And then Eastern, Modern maybe? I can't remember if that's a generic one or not. Eastern's not. All these ones are bot ones, Man-Bat Commandos. Shadow ones are somewhere. Yeah, Shadow. Oh, yeah, there we just looked over them. Yeah, Shadow. That's the SM one. So once again, 74 over 77 is not really a big deal. 3k difference. But the only outlier is the sewer. So that's going to be all the trinkets tested there. In the description, I'll put a link to the Excel document just in case you have it for your own personal testing. And if you have any suggestions in the comment section below that you want me to test as well, just let me know. Take care, guys. Thanks for watching.